What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Whitman. I am super excited for today's show. We have got really a pretty full plate here, so it's going to be a good show. And we've been away for a little bit, so we got plenty to talk about. I've been mentioning in my Dolphins rebuilds that the content's dropped off just a smidgen lately because I have been spending a lot more time watching a lot of college film, getting my draft board together. A reminder, you can get my draft board on patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. And then while we're doing this, a reminder to use promo code FranchiseGuy when shopping for tickets on SeatGeek. You get the best seats, the best prices, everybody wins. So I mentioned a full show today, and I meant it. We've got a Super Bowl preview. We're going to go in, we're going to do my Super Bowl pick, talk about a little bit about both teams, and then we're going to do a little bit of a prospect primer, talking about some of these edge rushers. It's a position I've been focusing in on a lot the last couple of days, so I got some of these top edge rushers that I want to talk about, what to expect from those guys a little bit. And then I'm going to start a series of sorts on this podcast. It's going to be fixing your team, and we're going to do it by division. We're going to do it on this podcast. We're going to do the AFC North today, so I'm basically going to do the ideal offseason for all four AFC North teams, and we'll knock these out throughout the next 5 weeks or so leading up to the NFL draft and free agency. And then we're going to end with the mailbag. It looks like we got some questions coming in on Twitter. A reminder to follow me on Twitter at TFG_football. So let's start this thing off talking about the Super Bowl here. The Patriots taking on the Rams being my pre-playoff Super Bowl pick. So things on that end, not necessarily a surprise for me at least. And then for the Patriots, I think that probably would have been my pick had I not been so high on the Chargers. Easy to say that now. But I did think, about week 13, 14 that the Patriots had a very good chance to get back here, and they really turned it on in the playoffs, just like we probably all should have had expected. So what was most surprising for me was Tom Brady in the AFC Championship, the way that he played. It seemed like he really, dug into his bag of tricks, because I did not see this zip on his ball and this kind of efficiency from him all year, and he really just, went into full, hold my beer mode at the end of that Chiefs game. I've been on Twitter rampages now about the NFL overtime rules, and this is a bit of a tangent. I know I'm supposed to talk about the Super Bowl, but I do need to just get this off my chest and put this on this channel that... the NFL overtime rules are an absolute disgrace. It's an offensive league. Quarterback ratings are off the charts high compared to even just 5 years ago. All the rules lean offense. Teams are building offense. And the fact that you are going to let a game end without the MVP, Patrick Mahomes, touch the ball, and I get it that, you look at overtime going back however long since they changed the rules, it's like 52% in favor of the coin toss winner. I get it. Yes, you can make a stop. You are at an advantage if you can do that. You're in good field position. It doesn't guarantee that you win. But look, 4 of the last 5 NFL overtimes in the playoffs, I've watched Aaron Rodgers now twice not get to touch the ball. I saw Matt Ryan in the Super Bowl the year he won MVP, and I just watched Patrick Mahomes now watch as his deflated, tired defense just watches as their team's season just ends. And I can't believe that these are still the rules. I've been saying for 3 years since I started this channel, and I promised if I ever got a platform, this would be something I remain very passionate about, and this has been my idea for 3 years now. So for those that are like, oh, just because the Patriots won off of it, you're now saying they need to change the rules. No. I've been saying this for 3 years. The overtime rules are a joke. So what I would do to fix it is you just start the ball with a touchback. You can score a touchdown, and the other team has a chance to answer. If you kick a field goal, the other team can answer as well. And on 4th down, you can either quote-unquote punt and the other team gets the ball as a touchback on their end, or you can go for it on 4th down, and if you don't get it, then they'll take over wherever you are on the field. The thing for me is people are like, oh, just make a stop on defense. You just need one stop. It's like, why should the team that starts with the ball also not have to prove that they can make a stop in an offensive league where defense is objectively harder to play? The analogy I used is it's like you're playing Super Smash Bros. One team, the team that wins the coin toss, is a giant King DDD with 100% damage because of the field position, and the other guy is like Olimar, who is the worst character in the game, and you're telling Olimar to beat the King DDD. It's like, yeah, if you can get that one hit in, you might win, but you are at a strategic disadvantage, being the team that has to play defense first. So the rule needs to change. I will stop talking about this because I have just run this thing dry on Twitter. But I have definitely not changed my opinion on the NFL overtime rules. But let's get back to the Patriots, who are just a freaking machine, man. You go back to the draft where Bill Belichick basically said, you know what? The league's getting kind of small. People are starting to play smaller D tackles. Their linebackers are tiny. I'm going to draft linemen, and I know the guy they drafted got hurt, but this was a philosophy change for them. I'm going to draft a running back. And the running back they took wasn't even that good, to be honest. But it was a philosophy change that when things start to matter at the end of the year, and in December and January, we are going to out-physical whoever we play. And that is what we've seen in these playoffs. And it's so impressive. Bill Belichick is always like 2 or 3 years ahead of the rest of the league. And it's why they whooped the Chargers, because as we saw against the Ravens, the Chargers tried to go small. Well, they can't do that against the Patriots because they just out-physical them. They just dominated the line of scrimmage against the Chiefs. Tom Brady was barely under any pressure all day. They could run the ball. But then Tom Brady he's just a killer, man. The dude in the fourth quarter is just a freaking machine. And I know it's redundant to just keep saying it, and I've actually never been the biggest like Tom Brady's the GOAT guy, but just watching him do that to just in the fourth quarter and overtime and on like 3rd and 10, just all of a sudden be able to just fire balls into tight windows, which frankly he wasn't doing to me on tape all year, but for him to just be like, hold my beer, guys, I got this. It was so impressive. The Patriots dynasty, I think, will look back in 20 years and be like, how the hell did that happen in this league where just cap space matters and it's hard to sustain dynasties? You know, we'll look at Tom Brady's consistency and Bill Belichick's ability to build a roster without needing superstars as just an objectively brilliant time in the NFL. Most of these teams, like I think we're seeing from the Rams here, and time will tell if this holds up, but most of the teams that win Super Bowls are capitalizing on a short window, especially since the cap has kind of changed. You go back to like 2010, the Packers did it with a really good defense when Rodgers was on a cheaper contract. The Seahawks with Russell Wilson on a cheap contract had a really good run, but we saw them kind of drop off, and they're just now starting to build back into that. The Broncos, was a free agency built roster that really got depleted pretty quickly. The Ravens, you can kind of say the same thing. The second they had to pay Joe Flacco that big deal, they took a big drop off. So it's definitely an NFL where it's about capitalizing on windows, and the Patriots have had a 20-year window, which is no team has even been close to that. So it's just amazing. And then for the Rams, to kind of talk about them, I mean, back in the offseason, I was pretty critical of their offseason. I liked some of the things they did. I liked the Marcus Peters trade. I liked a couple years ago when they brought in some offensive linemen. But I was pretty critical of like the Brandon Cooks trade and, some of these more all-in moves that they made, just because when Jared Goff's your quarterback, I don't know if you want to go all-in, but it looks like if they can pull this thing off, they're going to prove me wrong, because even if this falls apart like I kind of predicted, if they get that Super Bowl, it doesn't matter. If they don't win for 10 years, then you're probably still happy with what they did if you're a Rams fan. So they have done an excellent job. They have set a kind of model for teams with rookie contracts, with their quarterbacks specifically, to capitalize on that window, to be aggressive, and it'll allow you to take on some of these bigger contracts for players like Ndamukong Suh, like Brandon Cooks, and these are huge pieces. Suh wasn't a critical player throughout the regular season, but he has really stepped up in the postseason. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic because you got the win now team that is kind of all in this year, and then you've got the Patriots who are just like, we're here again. We're not going to push over, but I think this definitely means more to the Rams as we kind of transition towards my Super Bowl pick. I think the Rams, at least their coaches and their front office and everyone, they know that this is the year that they have to win. They even went out and traded a third-round pick for Dante Fowler, who they're not going to have next year because they just needed that one extra little piece. They are absolutely all in on this season. And for that reason, from a talent perspective, I see the Rams as a much more talented team. And then you look at the Patriots. Well, it's coaching. It's Tom Brady. It's discipline. And it's going to be a really interesting matchup. So who am I taking? That's what you're all waiting for me to get to. I did take the Rams in the not preseason, the pre-playoffs or whatever. And I'm going to stick with the Rams, but I have almost no confidence in that. I'm probably not going to bet this game on the spread, actually. I put a little money on the Rams to win the Super Bowl before the playoffs started, so I'm kind of set with that. I seriously think that this game is going to go either way, and I can't really put my flag down on either side. I think that in the fourth quarter, I like what the Patriots are going to have to offer, but Jared Goff has really impressed me. I think this offense is going to be able to do enough to put up 25 points or so against this Patriots defense that's looked a lot better lately. But then I look at the Rams defense, and it's hard to say that one player can really dominate a game, but that is Aaron Donald. They are going to force the Patriots to get rid of the ball quicker, which they can do. That's what they are built to do, the Patriots, is they neutralize pass rushes by getting rid of the ball quick. But I do think the Rams are a much better tackling team than both the Chargers and the Chiefs, who they've had a very easy time scoring against. So I do think the Patriots will move the ball good and well, just probably not quite to the degree that they had against the Chiefs and the Chargers. It's a different matchup as well because the strength of the Rams is that D-line. So they're going to have to adapt. They've really dominated up front the last 2 weeks, the Patriots. They're going to have to adjust that. So I do think offensively they are going to struggle a little more than they have the last couple weeks. So I'm going to take the Rams in their kind of win now window with better talent, with Jared Goff, who's played really impressive. I can't believe I'm sitting here picking Jared Goff against Tom Brady. As you guys know, I'm not a big Jared Goff guy, but he really has impressed this year. So I will go with the Rams in like a 30-27 win. I think that's actually exactly what Madden picked as well. So that'll be my pick. I'll stick with the Rams. But like I said, this one could go either way. I'm excited. It's going to be a good one. I don't know if it's going to be the best Super Bowl ever, but it'll be good regardless. So let's transition now and talk about some NFL draft because there's 30 other teams that are waiting to get talked about, or at least hear something that impacts them. So that is the beauty of the NFL draft. And this week, I've really been digging into the top 12 or so edge rushers, kind of diving deep into those players specifically, spending a little more time on these players than I think I will most positions, just because I think, for one, these are the best players in the class. This edge group is really, really deep and good at the top. It's one of the best edge classes I think you're going to see, especially if you consider guys like Zach Allen or Rashawn Gary as edge prospects. So there's 6 guys I want to talk about today: Josh Allen and Zach Allen. And then we've got Montez Sweat, Clelin Ferrell, Ja'Kai Polite, and then I'm actually going to talk about Ed Oliver. He's not an edge prospect, but I've got some opinions about Ed Oliver that I want to get out there. So let's start with Josh Allen, who has very, very quickly become a bit of the love child for draft Twitter and these mock drafts. He has just skyrocketed up the boards. He had like 15 sacks at Kentucky, most of them in the second half of the year. Kentucky, obviously, kind of a breakout team themselves. So Josh Allen has been kind of the hype monster right now. And he is an excellent player. I will say, though, I am not as high on Josh Allen, I think, as most people will say. I'm seeing a lot of Khalil Mack comparisons for Josh Allen. I just don't see that. He's used a lot off ball. They'll line him up almost as like a strong safety slot corner a lot and like blitz him in. He's got a really good, almost like juke swim move where when he's coming in full speed like that, it's a lot of speed to handle for a lot of these college linemen. When he's blitzing off the edge, he's good. He's got bend, he's got speed. You know, he kind of has that like Harold Landry thing where he can bend around the edge. I don't think he's quite as good as Harold Landry was though, as that bend rusher. So he is obviously an elite prospect. I have a top 10 grade on him. I think he is going to be a good player at the next level. But instead of Khalil Mack, my comparison for him is actually Anthony Barr when Anthony Barr was coming out. Now, the Vikings took Anthony Barr and they immediately used him as an off-ball linebacker. And I've actually been saying for about 3 years that Anthony Barr, who's going to be a free agent this year, by the way, is overrated. And my number one reason for that is he's always played out of position. So don't mistake this for me saying he's going to have the same career as Anthony Barr, because that's a unique situation. I think if Anthony Barr landed on a 3-4 team, if he went to Kansas City or Pittsburgh or Green Bay or somewhere, he could have had a much different career and maybe been a different player, and he might end up getting signed by a 3-4 team this offseason, and he actually still has a good career as an edge rusher. That's what I see in Josh Allen, is a good pass rusher, definitely an above-average pass rusher, but I don't see a bunch of different moveset. I don't see a ton of power from him. That's why I don't get the Khalil Mack comparisons. He has some power, but it's not like overwhelming. And then he can drop into coverage like really well. He is elite edge coverage. Like he might be the best coverage linebacker if he was entering the NFL as an off-ball linebacker. So some team, I think, in a 3-4 scheme is going to absolutely fall in love with Josh Allen. But there's a lot of 4-3 teams in this league. So that's why I think Josh Allen is kind of an interesting prospect. If I'm a 4-3 team, I'm not spending a top 10 pick on him because there's other players in this class that I think are much better as pass rushers, but Josh Allen does offer the most versatility out of anyone in this class. So I do look at like Green Bay at 12 or any other 3-4 teams in the top 10. Let me think. I mean, you do have Arizona. I'm actually pulling one up right now. Lance Zierlein mocks Josh Allen number 1 to the Cardinals. No way. Let's see. Who else is a 3-4 here? The Broncos at 10, but they don't need one. So, I mean, Green Bay really is the first 3-4 team. So unless someone's trading up, I wouldn't be totally surprised if that ended up being the case. But, you know, we'll see. There's a lot that's going to shake out. So that's my spiel on Josh Allen. Then I want to talk about the other Allen, Zach Allen. And Zach Allen is quickly becoming possibly my favorite player in this class. His tape, it's freaking remarkable for a college prospect. And I think some people are writing him off because he's not super fast. He's white. He's from Boston College. He's not young. He's a senior. So he might not excite people. But you know who else didn't really excite people that had a very similar build and skill set coming out of college? J.J. Watt. Like, I'm serious, guys. Zach Allen's game against Temple, I'll put the link to his cut up if you're watching this on YouTube. I'll put it in this video. Like, his game against Temple is one of the cleanest, most polished, and physically, not just physically, just purely dominant edge performances you're ever going to see at a college level. Like almost every play, he's either impacting run lanes, creating pressure, or swatting balls, and he'll create pressure with power. He can beat you around the edge. He's got a little bend. He can spin inside. Like, he is a polished player. 6'5", 285 pounds, so he's kind of got that like Michael Bennett, Calais Campbell thing where he'll play on the edge, or J.J. Watt, hell. But he can also come inside and rush from the inside as well. So he's super versatile. I actually have a higher grade on Zach Allen right now as I do on Josh Allen because I think he's a better pass rusher, and I think he's going to be better in run defense. And there's also just more 4-3 teams where Zach Allen's going to be, I think, valued higher than Josh Allen. So do keep an eye on Zach Allen. I think he's one of the most underrated players in this class. And then let's transition and talk about who I think is, not just at edge, but the entire class, the most overrated player, and that's Montez Sweat, who is getting a lot of first-round buzz right now. He's a 6'5", 245-pound edge guy out of Mississippi State. He's a transfer senior, so he's 22, 23 years old. He's a good athlete. He's a above-average athlete, but not an elite athlete. His tape is fine. Like, he's lengthy. He can make good tackles and run defense. He's got a decent swim move. He doesn't really have a bull rush. Like, his tape alone is fine. He's probably a late first, early second round pick on his tape. Like, I would actually say closer to a late second personally. But you look into this guy's background. He was kicked out of Michigan State, or asked to leave because of discipline issues. He ended up going to the Last Chance U conference. And for those that have seen that Netflix series, like, these players that end up leaving these D1 programs, like, more often than not, they've got a bunch of, like, head case issues where they aren't hard workers and they're entitled and they're unapproachable. And then he goes to Mississippi State, and he was solid. He had a good year. But he's also undersized, or like he hasn't grown into his 6'5" frame. So I've got questions about his work ethic in the weight room. You know, it's kind of the same thing with Arden Key. It's like, dude, why have you not grown into your body yet? You've been in college for 4 years. So that really, turns me away. It's not like he's Brian Burns from Florida State, where, yeah, he's 6'5", 235, but he's a true junior. Like, Sweat, you've been in college for 2 more years. Why are you not putting on weight? So that bothers me. And then there's reports at the Senior Bowl that teams are having a really hard time approaching him, that he's kind of off with his clique doing his own thing. And it's just like, I feel like this guy is the bust of this class. So I have right now a 4th-round grade on Montez Sweat, which is pretty crazy considering where a lot of people have him. But I think he is the do not draft player of this class. I don't know if I would draft him, to be honest. I'm that low on him. Because I don't even know if I like his game that much. So that's Montez Sweat. And then Clelin Ferrell out of Clemson. Now, he is a player that a lot of people like, and for good reason. He's a hell of a player. I right now have a 1st-round grade on him, but I am lower on him, and it's because I don't see necessarily the upside compared to some of these other guys in this class. I think that Derek Barnett, who came out of Tennessee a couple years ago, who I really liked at the time, and he's been solid in the NFL. He did get hurt this year, his 2nd year, and I still think Derek Barnett is a starting caliber edge guy. He's like a high-end number 2 edge rusher. Kind of not the most explosive dude, but really polished in terms of his get off, good in run defense. He's big, physical, and has some good pass rush moves as well. I think Clelin Ferrell is a similar player to Barrett, but this edge class is just much better, so he gets pushed back. I like Clelin Ferrell. I see him mocked a lot in that 12 to 14 range. I think Green Bay and Atlanta are very popular. Personally, if I'm a 3-4 team, I'm not drafting Clelin Ferrell. I think you're much better off with Josh Allen or Ja'Kai Polite, who we'll talk about next. I think he's going to be good. He'll be a high-end number 2 edge rusher. You can put him in right away. But to me, he's not super explosive. He doesn't have a ton of bend. He stands up upright a lot. Like, he ends up kind of being kind of underwhelming in run defense quite a bit. And the other thing is, Clemson edge rushers have a really bad track record. And it's dangerous to say players from a certain school to stay away from them, but after you see it enough times, you do kind of start to question it. So I like Clelin Ferrell more than any of those edge rushers out of Clemson that have come out, especially Vic Beasley, who I never understood that. He's like a 6'2", 235-pound edge guy. So I like Clelin Ferrell, but I'm definitely lower on him. And then you got Ja'Kai Polite, who is insane. He has totally surprised me. I didn't think I was going to like him as much before I did. And the Melvin Ingram comparisons are just spread far and wide, but I think they're justified. For one, he's got those like short dreads, so he actually looks like Melvin Ingram, but he plays like him, and he is almost the exact same size. Right now he's listed at 6'2", 242, so that's a little light. I think he's going to put on 5 to 10 pounds at the or before the combine, which would make me even higher on him. But he was way more skilled than I thought he would be. I just assumed, a young player out of Florida, hyped up for his explosiveness. I was like, okay, he's just going to bend around the edge, kind of like most of these top prospects, like Montez Sweat, honestly. But no, Ja'Kai Polite will set you up for a spin move. He's got a swim. He has great bend. He will bull rush you. Like, he has everything in terms of pass rush skill set. He is extremely explosive. His pursuit is fantastic. He can play run defense. He can drop in coverage. He's Melvin Ingram. He looks just like him at the college level, almost as if he were. This is kind of my new favorite metaphor, but like they put Ja'Kai Polite in a closet to watch the game in the locker room and found Melvin Ingram and put Polite's jersey on him. That's what it looks like. So I really like Ja'Kai Polite. I would spend a top 10 pick on him if I needed a pass rusher, whether I'm a 4-3 scheme or a 3-4 scheme. I think he can play either one, outside linebacker or edge end. So really like Ja'Kai Polite. He right now is my number 3 edge. I actually have Zach Allen above him right now. But they're different, right? It kind of depends what you're looking for. So, like, for example, if I was Green Bay, I would take Ja'Kai Polite and not Zach Allen. But if I'm like Detroit, who I need a more versatile defensive lineman type, I would take Zach Allen. So then the last guy I want to talk about here, not an edge rusher, but Ed Oliver. This guy had so much hype heading into this year. I can't remember a defensive player with this much hype before a season started. People thought that if he just sat out his junior year, at Houston, he still would have been the number 1 pick. And maybe that's true, because now there's people that are kind of shying away from Ed Oliver, but not me. There's a lot of things I don't understand about when people critique him. Number one, people say he's way under what he's listed at in terms of his weight. There's people that think he weighs 274 pounds, which that's fine. Like, if you've got sources or you've seen him step on a scale that say that, that's fine. Like, great, but I've never seen, evidence of it. When I watch him on tape, he looks like a defensive lineman. He looks like he's 6'2", about 290, 6'2", 6'3". Like, he looks like he could be a D lineman in the NFL, especially when you see guys like Geno Atkins and Aaron Donald, who are the 2 most dominant defensive tackles in the league, and they're much smaller than Ed Oliver. So that I don't get. And then, I don't get this, like, idea that he had a bad year, or that he just basically any criticism you hear about him where, like, oh, he doesn't play the run well, or he doesn't have a polished move set like Aaron Donald. It's like, okay, I get the Aaron Donald comparisons, but you realize he doesn't have to be the best defensive tackle in NFL history to be a good pick, right? Like, he can be Geno Atkins. And the other thing is, he's a true junior. Aaron Donald coming out, yeah, he had more polished pass rush moves and more production, I guess, but he had another year to craft his game, and teams weren't quite as aware of how dominant he was as Ed Oliver, who, like I said, was the most hyped up college prospect in the NFL this year. So I still think Ed Oliver is a blue chip defensive player. I think he should still go in the top 5, but it sounds like he might fall, and whoever ends up getting him, I think some team that just has him high on their board is just going to take him. Like, if it's Denver that gets Ed Oliver and you put Ed Oliver with freaking Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, are you kidding me? Like, is the NFL really going to let this happen? So I think Ed Oliver is still probably the second best player in this class, honestly. I've currently got him over what's his name, from Quinn Williams from Alabama. So that's a little spiel on some of the best pass rushers in this class. We'll continue to talk about the NFL draft starting the 1st of February. Is that tomorrow or in 2 days? I'm going to start doing on Patreon my film breakdowns of some of these players. So make sure you go to Patreon. You can get access to that. And then I'm going to do short prospect primers just on this channel. Just kind of 3 or 4 minutes of me talking about prospects I like. I can't show the film here on YouTube for copyright reasons, but that's some of the plans there for the draft. So next we are going to get into a segment I'm really excited about, where we are going to fix some NFL teams and do almost like a mock offseason. So we'll do a little bit about their free agency, who they got to re-sign, who they should go after, and then talk about the draft for those teams. And we'll kind of talk about where they would sit for me had they had this offseason entering next year. So let's start in the AFC North here with the Cleveland Browns, who actually are pretty set heading into next year, and they're definitely going to be a pretty hyped up team, I would say, heading into next year. I think they might actually be a pretty popular pick to be the division winner next year. I don't know if I'm going that far or not, but you look at this roster, it is pretty set. The offensive line could use another tackle. They could use a number 1 receiver. On the defense, they're in pretty good shape. I think they could really benefit from a really good edge rusher on the other side of Myles Garrett. I don't think that's Emmanuel Ogbah, but they're really not set to lose anyone big here. Tyrod Taylor is gone. I'm just kind of scrolling through the list here. You got some guys like E.J. Gaines, Trayvon Coley, D-tackle there. Phillip Gaines, like some starters, but those are all pretty much replaceable starters, I would say. Rashad Perriman, Rashad Higgins, pretty replaceable. And then Breen Bodie-Calhoun, again, a nice starter, but pretty replaceable. So they're in really good shape, and they got the quarterback there that is going to give you the benefit of the doubt when signing offensive players, because he can make guys around them better. So as far as re-signing guys, which is going to be the first step, I think I would try to re-sign one of those defensive backs. Personally, I think Breen Bodie-Calhoun offers some really nice versatility as a slot corner who can also play safety. So I would try to bring him back. I can't imagine his market would be anything unmanageable there. And then who else do we say they're losing? Tyrod, like you're going to let him go, obviously. So you're pretty good letting those guys go. And then when it comes to free agency, I mean, free agency is going to be lit this year, guys. I was just putting this list together, and I don't know if I can remember a pool of free agents that was this deep. So you look at the Browns, they could use another number 1 wide receiver. Now, this is the one position that is not lit, is receiver and tight end. The best guys are going to be like Randall Cobb, Golden Tate, John Brown. Antonio Brown's on the trade market, but the Steelers aren't trading Antonio Brown interdivision. There's no way. So I do think you're going to have to try and find that receiver through the draft, which we'll talk about. But I do think at tackle, maybe you try to sign like Jawan James, Cam Fleming, Trent Brown to at least guarantee you another starting caliber tackle, because they do have right tackle figured out, but they need to figure out left tackle. I think Trent Brown would make a lot of sense there, and you would all of a sudden have a really complete left to right offensive line there for Cleveland. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I would look at the D-line as where they need to spend their money, because they do have some pretty decent cap space in the offseason. Most of these teams do, to be honest. So you're going to lose Trayvon Coley unless you decide to re-sign him. So you have an instant need on the interior next to, what's his name, 65, Ogunjobi. So there's just a crazy deep group of D tackles. You could look at a lower end option like Henry Anderson, Al Woods, Margus Hunt, David Irving. You could even bring Danny Shelton back. I'm serious. There are like 20 deep of starting caliber interior defensive linemen available in free agency this year. But if I'm the Browns, why not talk to Ndamukong Suh, Sheldon Richardson, Malcolm Brown from the Patriots, Muhammad Wilkerson? Like, why not bring one of those guys in, see if he can continue to produce next to Myles Garrett, but then especially on the edge, again, really deep on the edge, interior line. Both of these are super deep, but if the Browns can splash and get Brandon Graham, I think that would be the best fit here for Brandon Graham. A 4-3 end can just wreak havoc opposite of Myles Garrett. I mean, that would be just awesome for them. But there's other options as well. You know, Trey Flowers, Frank Clark. I don't think Jadeveon Clowney would become available or be an option for them. He's a little too expensive. But even like Shaquille Barrett or a Preston Smith, like a B grade free agent edge rusher, I think would be an upgrade to Emmanuel Ogbah. And if you sign one or two of those guys on the D line, I mean, you all of a sudden have a true identity up front for Cleveland, which would be awesome. I think in the secondary, they're actually in pretty good shape because Jabril Peppers, Demarius Randall, obviously Ward at corner, they all are really good young players. So I don't think you really need to pay for anyone in the secondary. But I think your big focus is going to be where the meat of this free agency pool is, and that is at interior defensive line and edge rush, which are needs for them. So those would be some good signings there for the Browns. And then you look at the draft, they pick 16th. You know, I think in the first round, you're looking at tackle or wide receiver. If you don't sign like a Trent Brown at tackle in free agency, then you would think about Yadni Kajust or the guy out of Washington State, Andre Dillard. You could have some options at tackle. I think that's a pretty common pick there for the Browns as far as the mocks go. And then with the wide receivers, you can probably get a really good guy in the second round. That's why I do think tackle in the first makes more sense, because you're probably not getting that tackle in the second round. Now, Riley Ridley is my number one receiver right now. I don't know if he's going to fall to them in the second round, but Kelvin Harmon, Marquise Brown, DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, and N'Keal Harry, Deebo Samuel, Paris Campbell, like that's 8 guys there. And there's not a huge gap between any of them, in my opinion. So you get one of those guys with your second round pick, then I think the Browns would be in business if that was their offseason. So if they could sign a star on the D-line, whether it's inside or outside, I would say go outside and then go with a tackle and a wide receiver in the draft early, then this might be my pick to win the division. But right now, we're not talking about taking picks for the divisions next year. We're just trying to fix these teams one at a time. So that's my Browns offseason. Excuse me. Next, we are going to do the Baltimore Ravens, and they have a bunch of free agents coming up. So you got Terrell Suggs and C.J. Mosley. So the heart of your defense is set to be free agents. John Brown, set to be a free agent. Zadarius Smith, a good edge rusher for them who kind of broke out this year. You got Buck Allen and Ty Montgomery and Alex Collins and Gus Edwards. So your entire running back room, you're going to have to decide who to bring back there. Michael Pierce, one of their better defensive players as well, set to be a free agent. And Patrick Charzard on Wuasor. And Patrick Venusaur on Wuasor, set to be a free agent as well. So they have their hands full. How much cap space do they actually have here? Looks like they have an estimated cap space of $9.4 million. Oh, man, this is a tough offseason for the Baltimore Ravens. So, yeah, man, what do you do? I guess you don't really want Terrell Suggs to leave. You probably see if he wants to come back on a one-year deal. He wasn't bad. You kind of got to let Zadarius Smith go. You kind of got to let Michael Pierce test the market. You got to do everything you can, though, I think, to retain C.J. Mosley. He means so much to that defense. The tag number would be about 10 or 11 mil. So if you can clear up the cap space to get C.J. Mosley, that has got to be priority number one. But, man, you're really starting to cut corners for this team that kind of turned a corner this year. So it's too bad that they're butting up against the cap, because they have that young quarterback right now in Lamar Jackson. I mean, maybe they can find a way to get rid of that Joe Flacco contract, because that is just dragging them down right now. But, free agency is going to be really tough for the Ravens, because, you want to bring C.J. Mosley back. And if you do that, you're really not going to be able to spend up for any of these stars. You can kind of find holes around the margins and find value contracts, but they are going to have a hard time building through free agency. So that, leads to the draft. And what can they do in the draft? They have a pick in the mid-20s. They desperately need some offensive talent, but I've said in the past that I would not draft receiver in the first round. Because Lamar Jackson's not going to use his receivers. He targeted receivers at an astoundingly low rate. It was all running backs and tight ends. He had like 9 or 10 targets a game to wide receivers. So I don't think you use a high first round or just a first round pick on a receiver, because I don't know if you're going to get that value out of them. You need a running back. You're probably not going to pay any of these running backs with these contract situations. So luckily, the pool's pretty deep. Maybe you get like Spencer Ware or Mark Ingram or C.J. Anderson to be your guy next year, or you just continue to find the next Gus Edwards or bring Gus Edwards back or something like that. But the offense, I don't see being very good. I think defensively is where they're going to have to try and be good again. So I would say draft defense and probably, honestly, edge rush again, because Terrell Suggs is getting up there in age. Matt Judon he's solid, but I don't see him as a number one guy. And then you've also got Zadarius Smith, who you're going to let walk. So I think edge rush is deep in this class. I could see you going edge rush there, maybe a safety, but Eric Weddle and Tony Jefferson isn't a bad combo. So it sucks to say it, but the Ravens probably not in for a very exciting offseason. I think it's going to be a lot of trying to retain what they have and repeat the type of team they were this year by playing defense and getting creative with Lamar Jackson. So then we've got the Bengals next, and let's take a look at their upcoming free agents. Tyler Eifert, if you could even say he was a player for them. He's played like 3 games in 3 years. Cedric Ogbuehi, whatever, he didn't even start this year. Darqueze Dennard in the slot, that's a starter that they'll have to replace. Adolphus Washington, a D-tackle that came in and played pretty well for them. And that is pretty much it for them in terms of impact players. So they at least are not like the Ravens. Michael Johnson, another one, but he didn't play much either. So at least they're not like the Ravens and that they have a bunch of guys they need to retain, but they do only have an estimated cap space of $8.4 million. So not a ton of room to be active in free agency. They just gave big contracts to Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap. So free agency is going to be tough. I think you could potentially get a lineman in here. You might be able to afford like Roger Saffold or Mitch Morse or I don't know, Jawan James. Like, you might be able to afford one of those guys, but that's pretty much all you're going to be able to do. On defense, other than that, you're pretty solid. Maybe you try to replace Darqueze Dennard with a slot corner here like Mike Hilton or Bryce Callahan. You're not going to be able to splash for a starting corner, which I think this team would want secondary help. And then the safeties, I really like what we got from Jesse Bates. And I do like the other safety. I'm usually good with names, guys, but I'm spitting names out left and right. Sean Williams. So you're pretty solid at safety. It's just not going to be too much free agency action, I don't think, for the Bengals all around. So you're going to look to the draft again. And at least this Bengals team has drafted pretty well, honestly, especially this last draft was real solid, getting some good defensive players. So in the draft, they pick, 11th, 10th? And my favorite pick for them is Devin White. Their biggest need is going to be linebacker. I don't think they're going to pay like Quan Alexander, C.J. Mosley, or Anthony Barr the money that they're going to kind of demand, especially based on this cap estimate. So you look through the draft, and Devin White is a guy who very well could be a top 10 pick. He's a super fast linebacker, potentially a blue chip player in this class, and there's a solid chance with the depth at edge and interior line and potentially some teams taking some quarterbacks in the top 10 there. There's a chance for Devin White to, in a way, fall to them at 11, which would be just a home run pick for them because that is their biggest need on the defense. And I think with him, you do have some young talent on that defense surrounding Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap, who are still blue chip defenders. And then you've got William Jackson and Jesse Bates in the secondary. you could have a very solid, if not top 10 defense next year. And then offensively, maybe you get that piece in free agency for your offensive line. You're able to keep A.J. Green and Andy Dalton healthy, and you can kind of sustain a serviceable offense. I really like Joe Mixon. I think John Ross is probably lost at this point. He was the lowest rated receiver by PFF among eligible receivers. So he's probably a lost cause, but at least Tyler Boyd, I keep saying at least, you got a lot of at leasts here for the Bengals trying to justify a lot of things with how big of a mess this team has been. But Tyler Boyd totally broke out. I thought he would have been a free agent this year, but they have one more cheap year of Tyler Boyd. So you've got that going for you. You really do have some weapons here. You'd like to shore up that offensive line a little more, and I think this could actually be a pretty good team next year. They were just ravaged by injuries this year after they had a pretty hot start. If you can think back to like the end of September, this was one of the hyped up teams. So I don't think the Bengals need to necessarily blow all this up. They got a new coach who can also hopefully spark that offense a little bit and this culture in general. So I think it's going to be a rather mellow summer for the Bengals, but I do think you have reason to be optimistic because you drafted well and you've got two blue chip defenders that just got new contracts. So then the last team in the AFC North here, the Pittsburgh Steelers, saving the most interesting offseason here, definitely for last. Obviously, you got the Antonio Brown situation. If they were going to trade him, it almost feels like they would have done it by now, but it could certainly still happen. It feels like a situation that might just kind of simmer out and they'll just bring him back. But who knows? It could very well be that they trade him. I think they want a first-round pick. I don't know what team in the NFL is giving a first-round pick for Antonio Brown. There's really only two teams that it makes a ton of sense for them to trade for him with that contract, and that's San Francisco would make sense, but they're not giving the number 1 overall pick for Antonio Brown, and I wouldn't give the 33 pick. Or sorry, they don't pick number 1. They pick like second, third, but you get what I'm saying. And then Green Bay is a name that's been floated out there, but I wouldn't trade the Saints pick for Antonio Brown. And with Aaron Rodgers, you can make receivers good, so I don't know if I would trade the second pick for Antonio Brown, the second round pick. So it could be that they're just not getting the offers that they thought, and they're just going to try and ease this situation. I think that's what the Steelers fans are hoping for, because this is still a team that is going to try and win next year, and trading your best player is going to hurt that, obviously. So the players set to be free agents. Ramon Foster, left guard, had a great season, so you're going to have a hole on that offensive line, though they do have some depth. But B.J. Finney is set to be a free agent as well. Mike Hilton, the slot corner, is going to be a free agent, and Le'Veon Bell. But you're pretty good at running back. So not a ton of players leaving. Let's take a look at their cap space real quick. So they're estimated $19.5 million in cap space. So they are in decent shape in terms of cap. It's not a ton of cap space. But you definitely want to beef up this defense, particularly in the secondary. Now, this defense actually had its moments this year. I think that pass rush really surprised a lot of people, myself included. But you have holes in that secondary. So I think it's important that you try to get Mike Hilton back. I don't know if they splash in free agency. They could probably release Joe Hayden and clear up enough cap space then go and sign. Maybe Bradley Roby, who played in Philadelphia just a couple years ago, but maybe like a Trevor Williams from LA, who's probably going to get about $6 to $7 million. Maybe you talk to like Kareem Jackson, although he's more of a safety hybrid type. So maybe just keeping Joe Hayden's going to be your best option at corner if it's not Bradley Roby, who I like. And then on offense, you just kind of rinse and repeat. You don't really need to spend a lot of money here. Even losing Ramon Foster, I have a feeling that this team is going to be able to fill that guard position, whether it's mid-draft or with a B-grade free agent like Mike Upati or a James Carpenter, someone like that. So you look towards the draft, this team picks in the middle of it, and I think secondary is their big need. Now, you see DeAndre Baker mocked here quite a bit out of Georgia. I do think corner. We talked about how it's not the best in free agency. It's not going to have the best options. Corner is this team's number one need by far. So I would target Byron Murphy if possible. I think Byron Murphy's a total stud. I think there's a chance he falls, though I also think there's a chance he just shoots up in the pre-draft process. But, you know, maybe Greedy Williams falls to you. Not that DeAndre Baker's a bad player, but I think he might be a tier below those other two guys we just mentioned. So if I was a Steelers fan, I would be keeping my fingers crossed for Byron Murphy or Greedy Williams. If you got to settle for DeAndre Baker or someone else, it's not the end of the world. But that's got to be the first pick. And then, you know, maybe in the mid-rounds, you look at a guard, you look at some linebackers, you look at probably another receiver with the Antonio Brown situation. But I think the Steelers will probably still be good next year, but this locker room is just full of nightmares right now because they've been losing momentum slowly, I think, every offseason, just realizing that this window is closing. And they just haven't been able to get over that Patriots hump. I know they beat the Patriots this year, but they've got that. They didn't even win their division this year. And, man, it's just an aging window here. So it could be the end. It really could be, especially with the Browns looking the way that they're looking. And like I said, I think the Bengals will be pretty good next year. And the Ravens, although they're in for a rough offseason, I think you really are not going anywhere with that defense. So, you know, it is what it is. It's going to be a really competitive division. Excited to hear from you guys on what you think or what you would do with these teams. But now it's time to open up the mailbag, wrap up this podcast. So pulling up Twitter here at TFG_football. Reminder to follow there. You can get your questions into the show every week. So let us see here. First question of the day is going to be, who should the Cowboys pick with their first pick at 58? So the Cowboys definitely need to re-sign DeMarcus Lawrence, by the way. I didn't even talk about him as a potential free agent because I think he's going to get tagged. But that's not the question. Pick at 58. So their biggest needs are going to be like interior line. They could honestly maybe use another like guard or a tackle. I don't know if Connor Williams is the answer, to be honest. He did play a little better towards the end of the year. You got Lyle Collins. They got a really good defense. You don't really need an edge rusher. Could never hurt. And your corners are pretty solid. Safety would be a good one. So at 58, what kind of players are you looking at? I haven't scouted deep into the safety group yet, but you know, maybe like Nasir Adderley, Deontay Thompson, Jawan Thornhill. Those guys could all be there. Marvell Tell, Taylor Rapp. There's a good cluster of safeties that will be there in the second to early third round. I think all those guys I just named have a chance of being there. I think Jonathan Abram is the one guy that will probably be for sure gone. So that would be a really good pick, would be a safety. Or you could go with a wide receiver. You know, I don't think they need to do that. They have Amari Cooper. They have Michael Gallup. I think that's a solid group there. But if you wanted to try and get more explosive, or you could think about a tight end. It's a really good group of tight ends. You know, you're probably going to be sitting there looking at potentially T.J. Hawkinson, Jace Sternberger, two guys that are second to third round players who you could be thinking about. So they're going to get a good player there with that second pick. And then the fact that they got Amari Cooper for that first, that's a pretty good draft if you could do one of those picks that I just mentioned there. Thoughts on the Packers taking Montez Sweat? Well, I talked about Montez Sweat earlier in the show. Not a fan of Montez Sweat. I think he's going to be a bust. From Jacob, what are your thoughts about the Alliance of American Football? I like the idea of a D-League of sorts. We've seen leagues like this try to pop up in the past, and the interest just wasn't really there. I think we're getting closer and closer to this. I like the idea that it would be over the summer so we can still have some football to watch. The last 2 years, the Spring League, it's almost like a tryout, like a Senior Bowl of sorts for undrafted free agents and veteran players that have been released. And that's actually been somewhat successful. So I do think we're seeing more and more interest by the NFL teams in some kind of a league like this. Now, is it ever going to become like something where people are betting on and have big TV contracts and teams start to merge with the NFL? No, I don't think that is ever going to happen, and I don't think that's what the Alliance Football League wants. I think they want like a minor league degree of interest, but they want it to be something where you see these players that are good go on to play in the NFL, and that's what the NFL wants. That's what the players want. That's what the teams want, and what the fans want. So I think if it's done right, with safety and marketing and contract structure and all that stuff, if it's got the right people in charge, I do think it could be successful and be very interesting and something I would definitely watch. Do I think that'll happen? Maybe not. Like I said, these things have happened in the past and have flamed out. So I'll believe it when I see it. I will support it. I'll watch it when it's there. But if the product isn't good, then it's just not going to last. From Bryce, who has the better situation for their quarterback coming into the offseason, the Bills or the Jets? That's interesting. Well, I think the Jets clearly have better receivers and probably a better offensive line, though they both have pretty bad lines. But then the Bills have a better coaching situation. I think they actually did a really good job scheming up Josh Allen last year. If I was a quarterback that was picking where I would go to play next year, I'd probably just stick with the Jets. Adam Gase now there is a quarterback friendly, quarterback guru type. He did a really good job with Ryan Tannehill, which if he can do that with Ryan Tannehill, I think he can be all right with Sam Darnold. And just the receivers are much better. You got Robbie Anderson. You've got the tight ends. I like Chris Herndon specifically is a good player. They just extended Quincy Enunwa, a nice physical slot guy who can kick outside a little bit. So you definitely have better weapons, and the line's just a touch better, but the Bills do have the best linemen in Deion Dawkins. And the Bills just pick a little higher in this draft, so they're going to have the Jets pick a little higher, so they're going to have an easier time finding more talent. So I think the Jets are probably in a better spot than the Bills. Name your 3 most likely candidates to sign Le'Veon Bell. Well, I think the Jets, actually, are a really good candidate. The Bills wouldn't be too bad either. I would say both of those would be in my top 2. Now, I think a lot of these teams that have good offenses are smart in that they don't really see paying Le'Veon Bell a big $40 million, $50 million contract as a good investment. He's a guy with injury history. He's had off-the-field questions. I don't see a team like the Colts or the Chiefs, who are very common, making that investment, especially because they have shown that they can move the ball effectively without a star running back. It's a very replaceable position. Marlon Mack was like a 4th-round pick, 5th-round pick, and he's fine. I don't love him, but I'd rather have him at $600,000 than Le'Veon Bell at $14 million. And the Chiefs, I mean, come on. Damian Williams looked like Kareem Hunt, so I don't know why they would bring Le'Veon Bell in, especially when they already have one bad contract on their team with Sammy Watkins. So I really don't think it'll be the Chiefs, which is a team that gets floated out there. So I'm going to say Bills and the Jets, and man, who else would be a good option? I mean, the Texans, I think he would be good there, but I don't know if they would do that because they're already probably going to have to pay Jadeveon Clowney about $20 million. The Raiders would be interesting, but I don't know how you can justify paying him $14, $15 million when he didn't pay Khalil Mack $19, $20 million. So that would be kind of a PR nightmare for John Gruden. So Bills, Jets. I mean, Green Bay wouldn't do it. Detroit, no. I don't know if I can come up with a third team. I don't think the market for Le'Veon Bell is going to be as big as some people think, to be honest. He's got a lot of red flags, and it's a replaceable position. Do I think the Rams could be the next big dynasty? And what do I think of Aaron Jones? Rams, definitely not. I said I like Jared Goff, but I don't think he's a team that's going to carry a team and a roster that eventually has to pay him $30-35 million, which is the way things are headed. We already see that they have a bunch of upcoming free agents in Ndamukong Suh, who's the safety, LaMarcus Joyner, their left guard, Roger Saffold, their left tackle, Andrew Whitworth, their center. Both those guys are super old. Like, they have a lot of holes that are going to show up real fast. That offensive line specifically is what makes that team great, and they are going to have a really hard time rebuilding that offensive line in a heartbeat. And even the right guard, Austin Blythe, was really good, but as an undrafted guy who was cut by the Colts, like, how good is he going to be once those three studs to his left go away, you know? So I don't think they're going to be a dynasty. I think they're actually going to fall apart pretty quickly. Now, I think Sean McVay is an absolute genius, and he's bought himself about 5 or 6 years of losing football after the last 2 years. So over time, they could bounce back, absolutely, because I think Jared Goff's a good quarterback, and I think Sean McVay is a freaking genius. But, man, and then you got to talk about how Aaron Donald's not going to play at this level forever either. So I think this is as good as they're going to get. I think they could certainly bounce back and kind of be like what the Falcons are maybe in about 2 or 3 years, but I actually don't even know if they're going to be a playoff team next year. So next we've got, what do I think of Aaron Jones? I think he's an extremely explosive running back, really good player when he's healthy. Actually reminds me a lot of Jamal Charles, but I don't think he can stay healthy. I think he runs too aggressively. He had injury questions in college, and he's been hurt in the NFL every year. So I do think Green Bay should look to not necessarily move on from Aaron Jones, but bring someone else in that can take a little workload off and carry the workload should Aaron Jones get hurt, because Jamal Williams is just a guy to me. Can Curtis Samuel become the number 2 receiver in Carolina? I've never been a Curtis Samuel guy, but he really impressed this year. I would need to see another year before saying he's even start worthy. He's a really good gimmicky player, and he made some nice big plays this year. I think he's going to have another year as that, and then, I don't know. We'll see. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but I'm not going to rule it out. He's got all the physical talent in the world to do it. You should make a free agency mock. I think I will actually do that. And where do I think Seahawks will go in the draft, maybe trade down? Yeah, I think trade down would make sense for them. I believe they do not have a lot of picks, and it's a team that could use a lot more young talent on the team. I do like the Deontay Thompson fit for them, but where they pick at 20 is probably a little early. You could absolutely go offensive line because their left tackle, the veteran that they got from Houston, that I'm spacing on his name, he is not getting any younger, so they're going to need a left tackle and, frankly, a right tackle, even though Fetty played a little better this year. If I were them, I would continue to address that offensive line. So if you like the value there at 20 in the first round, maybe you like Andre Dillard or Yannick Kajust or, I don't know, Dalton Risner. If you like one of those guys, just take them. If you think you can move down, collect some more picks, and still get a guy you like, then do that. But, that's my thoughts on Seattle. Do Brady or Gronk retire if they win the Super Bowl? Well, Brady said he isn't, so I'm not going to question him. Gronk, I mean, maybe. Who knows with Gronk? I bet he still plays at least the life of his contract and then thinks about it. From Austin, biggest risers and fallers from the Senior Bowl. Well, I can only really go off of what I've heard. I heard that Deebo Samuel had a great time at the Senior Bowl. I tend to put a little less weight in the Senior Bowl than I think some other people. I think it's important. But, some people were, when I was talking about Zach Allen, said, we had a terrible Senior Bowl. Well, we also have 13 real meaningful games of football to watch. So, and I get that there's practice as well, but that's a totally different environment. So I think it's important, but I don't necessarily put as much weight in it. I do think it's bigger for some of these smaller guys to kind of make a name for themselves. Like Andy Isabella is a name, a receiver out of Boston College who really stood out Nasir Adderley gained some hype in the practices. So those are some risers. Fallers, I'm not sure. Maybe Montez Sweat after reports that he was kind of a dick. I don't know. And then who should the Giants make? Oh, and the other guy is Daniel Jones. I didn't think he looked very good out of Duke. And my comparison for him was Ryan Tannehill. I don't even know if he's going to be as good as Ryan Tannehill. He might be closer to Blake Bortles. I don't know. I'm not a big Daniel Jones guy. Who should the Giants make a priority in free agency, and what positions should they pursue? I'm not going to spoil that because I will eventually get to that on the podcast. Could you see any of the newly hired coaches make their teams go from worst to first? Newly hired coaches from worst to first. Maybe the Browns. Maybe the Browns with Freddie Kitchens, although they weren't worst, but they could make the playoffs with their new coach. I think just Green Bay in general is a bounce-back candidate. I don't know if that's because of Matt LaFleur or not, but anytime you got Aaron Rodgers, you're going to be in the conversation to make the playoffs. I don't think it's going to happen for Cliff Kingsbury, not in his first year. I just don't think there's enough talent there in Arizona. Talked about the Bengals, could be a bounce-back candidate. Dolphins, no, they're going to blow that thing up, I think. Who else do we have? I'm spacing on a few teams, I know. Those are the ones that stood out to me. Next up, we've got, the Broncos. I mean, there's a chance that they end up with an elite defense. Like I said, if they get Ed Oliver, that defense is going to be insane, especially if Ed Oliver gets to work with Vic Fangio. So it could happen for Denver. I don't think Denver was that bad this year. They just need better quarterback play. If you're Mike Pettin, would you switch to a 4-3 defense and draft a traditional 4-3 edge rusher? I tweeted about how 3-4 defenses are tough. Some of the best defenses in the NFL are 3-4s. The Bears and the Ravens, the Broncos, they're all 3-4 based. Now 3-4 and 4-3 is kind of a dead term anyway because nickel is the new base and you can really kind of do whatever you want. But I do see your point. I do think it's easier to go from a terrible defense to just a surviving defense with a 4-3, just because the scheme itself is less confusing. You're going to be more focused on keeping everything in front of you. The personnel, I think, is just a little easier to find because those edge guys, I think 7 out of the top 10 edge rushers are better as a 4-3 D-end with their hand on the ground as opposed to a stand-up outside linebacker. And then finding smaller off-ball linebackers like the Jerome Bakers of the world, they're more suited to play in a 4-3 scheme just because they're going to play outside the tackles a little more. So I do think when you're a team like Green Bay and you should have a good offense and your defense should be more focused on not being terrible as opposed to being like the Bears, the Ravens, where you need to win with defense and just, make offenses just poop their pants because they don't know what's coming at them. I don't think that needs to be Green Bay. I think Green Bay should be a team that keeps everything in front of them and lets Aaron Rodgers win the game for them. I think a 4-3 would be better for them. I think Nick Perry, who they're paying $14 million, is a better fit as a 4-3 D-end. He's not fast and quick enough to drop into coverage. And Mike Pettin dropped his edge rushers into coverage more than any team in the NFL last year. I think that's a reason why they did struggle. I would switch to a 4-3. They won't, though. Should the Falcons look to the O-line or D-line in the first round? I don't know if that's a yes or no question or an either-or question. With the O-line, Ryan Schrader really struggled. You could maybe replace the tackle. You could maybe think about a guard. Yeah, I mean, you could go either of those positions. It looks like... actually, I didn't see him on Spotrac, but is their D tackle? What's his name? Grady Jarrett. Is he a free agent? I'm genuinely asking. Let me know in the comments because he didn't show up on Spotrac. But if he's going to go, then the Falcons should go D-line, because I don't see a whole lot of physicality up front outside of Grady Jarrett. And they could really use another edge rusher, because Vic Beasley is terrible, and Doc McKinley is still growing. He's a solid edge rusher, but he's definitely not looking like he's going to be a true number one right now. So I do think D-line is probably where the Falcons should go. What is the best pick for teams in the top 5? I'll be doing mock drafts and talking about specific picks like that, so I'm going to skip that one. Sorry, Danny. Top 10 free agents this offseason. Well, I kind of hit on that. I do have this list in front of me that I have starred players on it, so might as well rattle these off. I mean, not in any particular order, but Le'Veon Bell. And I'm also going to, I think, do a video about this, but a little sneak peek. Le'Veon Bell, Ndamukong Suh. Brandon Graham is probably number 1, honestly. I think he's a stud and still has some good years left in him. Trey Flowers, definitely. Frank Clark, D. Ford. Preston Smith is a good player out of Washington. Anthony Barr, if he can get in the right place that knows how to use him, maybe as an edge rusher. C.J. Mosley, I think the Ravens are going to find a way to keep him. But if he hits the market, he'd probably be number 1. Quan Alexander is another really good one out of Tampa who's going to be a good signing for somebody. And then Bradley Roby at corner. Earl Thomas is a good one. He's a little overhyped, I think, a 30-year-old safety coming off his second broken leg. I think he's going to still be an impact player, but I don't think he's going to be the same old Earl Thomas. And then Landon Collins and Adrian Amos are 2 other safeties. I'd frankly rather pay those 2 than Earl Thomas just because of the age. So this is a really good class of free agents. When are you releasing your new rosters? Probably not till we get close to the start of free agency. We're probably about 6 weeks away from that new roster overhaul coming. Although I will say that I did just release, or somebody who I'll give a shout out in a minute in a different video or tweet, but the PS4 roster did get updated by somebody, so that will be up shortly, I think. And then last question here. Actually, we got 2 more. Do you think Suh is going to go Super Saiyan sicko mode on the Pats O-line? No, I don't. I think he'll have a good game. He's looked great in the playoffs. But I don't think he's going to be like, a game-wrecking player against a good Patriots offensive line. And then from Chad, what player/coach gets the most excuses made for them, and what player/coach gets the most unwarranted criticism? Man, that's a tough one to think about on the fly. Excuses made for them. I mean, this year, I'm going to say Mitch Trubisky, man. I had the same conversation this year with Bears fans about Mitch Trubisky as I had with Dolphins fans last year about Ryan Tannehill and Blake Bortles with Jags fans last year. Eerily familiar. I think Trubisky is far away from being a franchise quarterback and has a lot more to prove from an accuracy standpoint and from just a decision-making / ability to come off first reads standpoint. And then player that gets the most criticism unwarranted. I've always thought Adam Gase, I've talked about a lot. I think Bill O'Brien, though, is a good football coach that gets too much criticism. He has done nothing but turn that organization around. He clearly was the guy, I would think, that said that he liked Deshaun Watson. You usually don't draft a quarterback without your coach's approval. So that was a good call. He doesn't have a lot of talent to work with outside of DeAndre Hopkins, and their offense seems to overachieve more often than not. And then defensively, they've had pretty good defenses and have some holes on defense as well, I think, especially in that secondary. So I think my answer to that question is going to be Bill O'Brien. I think he's a very underrated head coach, and I think Texans fans are a little too hard on him. So that's it. A little over an hour this week. We're going to definitely continue to do these. We definitely want to keep doing these off-season breakdowns for these teams. We'll reassess the Super Bowl and talk some more draft next week. If you're on YouTube, hit that like button. If I'm able to get these up on podcast services, I guess leave a review, 5 stars. I don't know. I'm still working on the podcast world. Forgive me. Hopefully we get that figured out sooner rather than later. So this was fun. Cheers as always, guys, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace out.